cases in which the origin of a claim is relevant to the truth or falsity of the claim. For example, a claim that comes from a reliable expert is likely to be true, provided it is in her area of expertise. Examples of genetic fallacy. The current Chancellor of Germany was in the Hitler Youth at age 3. With that sort of background, his so-called reform plan must be a fascist program. I was brought up to believe in God, and my parents told me God exists, so he must. Sure, the media claims that Senator Bedfellow was taking kickbacks. But we all know about the media's credibility, don't we? Fallacy. Guilt by association. Also known as bad company fallacy, company that you keep fallacy. Description of guilt by association. Guilt by association is a fallacy in which a person rejects a claim simply because it is pointed out that people she dislikes accept the claim. This sort of reasoning has the following form. It is pointed out that person A does not like accept claim P. Therefore P is false. It is clear that sort of reasoning is fallacious. For example, the following is obviously a case of poor reasoning. You think that 1 + 1 = 2. But, Adolf Hitler, Charles Manson, Joseph Stalin, and Ted Bundy all believed that 1 + 1 = 2. So, you shouldn't believe it? The fallacy draws its power from the fact that people do not like to be associated with people they dislike. Hence, if it is shown that a person shares a belief with people he dislikes, he might be influenced into rejecting that belief. In such cases, the person will be rejecting the claim based on how he thinks or feels about the people who hold it, and because he does not want to be associated with such people. Of course, the fact that someone does not want to be associated with people she dislikes does not justify the rejection of any claim. For example, most wicked and terrible people accept that the earth revolves around the sun and that lead is heavier than helium. No sane person would reject these claims simply because this would put them in the company of people they dislike, or even hate. Examples of guilt by association. Will and Kaitina are arguing over socialism. Kaitina is a pacifist and hates violence and violent people. Kaitina: I think that the United States should continue to adopt socialist programs. For example, I think that the government should take control of vital industries. Will: so, you are for state ownership of industry? Kaitina: certainly. It is a great idea and will help make the world a less violent place. Will: well, you know Stalin also endorsed state ownership on industry. At last count he wiped out millions of his own people. Pol Pot of Cambodia was also for state ownership of industry. He also killed millions of his own people. The leadership of China is for state-owned industry. They killed their own people in that square. So, are you still for state ownership of industry? Kaitina: oh, no. I don't want to be associated with those butchers. Jen and Sandy are discussing the topic of welfare. Jen is fairly conservative politically, but she has been an active opponent of racism. Sandy is extremely liberal politically. Jen: I was reading over some private studies of welfare and I think it would be better to have people work for their welfare. For example, people could pick up trash, put up signs, and maybe even do skilled labor that they are qualified for. This would probably make people feel better about themselves and it would get more out of our tax money. Sandy: I see. So, you want to have the poor people out on the streets picking up trash for their checks? Well, you know that is exactly the position David Count endorses. Jen: who is he? Sandy: I'm surprised you don't know him, seeing how alike you two are. He was a Grand Mookie wizard for the Aryan Pure White League and is well known for his hatred of blacks and other minorities. With your views, you'd fit right into his little racist club. Jen: so, I should reject my view just because I share it with some racist? Sandy: of course. Libbard and Ferris are discussing who they are going to vote for as the next department chair in the philosophy department. Libbard is a radical feminist and she despises Wayne and Bill, who are two sexist professors in the department. Ferris: So, who are you going to vote for? Libbard: Well, I was thinking about voting for Jane, since she is a woman and there has never been a woman chair here. But, I think that Steve will do an excellent job. He has a lot of clout in the university and he is a decent person. Ferris: You know, Wayne and Bill are supporting him. They really like the idea of having Steve as the new chair. I never thought I'd see you and those two pigs on the same side. Libbard: Well, maybe it is time that we have a woman as chair. Fallacy. Hasty generalization. Also known as fallacy of insufficient statistics, fallacy of insufficient sample, leaping to a conclusion, hasty induction. Description of hasty generalization. This fallacy is committed when a person draws a conclusion about a population based on a sample that is not large enough. It has the following form. Sample S, which is too small, is taken from population P. Conclusion C is drawn about population P based on S. The person committing the fallacy is misusing the following type of reasoning, which is known variously as inductive generalization, and statistical generalization. X% of all observed as RBS. Therefore X% of all as RBS. The fallacy is committed when not enough as are observed to warrant the conclusion. If enough as are observed, then the reasoning is not fallacious. Small samples will tend to be unrepresentative. As a blatant case, asking one person what she thinks about gun control would clearly not provide an adequate sized sample for determining what Canadians in general think about the issue. The general idea is that small samples are less likely to contain numbers proportional to the whole population. For example, if a bucket contains blue, red, green, and orange marbles, then a sample of 3 marbles cannot possibly be representative of the whole population of marbles. As the sample size of marbles increases, the more likely it becomes that marbles of each color will be selected in proportion to their numbers in the whole population. The same holds true for things others than marbles, such as people and their political views. Since hasty generalization is committed when the sample, the observed instances, is too small, it is important to have samples that are large enough when making a generalization. The most reliable way to do this is to take as large a sample as is practical. There are no fixed numbers as to what counts as being large enough. If the population in question is not very diverse, a population of cloned mice, for example, then a very small sample would suffice. If the population is very diverse, people, for example, then a fairly large sample would be needed. The size of the sample also depends on the size of the population. Obviously, a very small population will not support a huge sample. Finally, the required size will depend on the purpose of the sample. If Bill wants to know what Joe and Jane think about gun control, then a sample consisting of Bill and Jane would, obviously, be large enough. If Bill wants to know what most Australians think about gun control, then a sample consisting of Bill and Jane would be far too small. People often commit hasty generalizations because of bias or prejudice. For example, someone who is a sexist might conclude that all women are unfit to fly jet fighters because one woman crashed one. People also commonly commit hasty generalizations because of laziness.